I must say I'm a bit bewildered, like as in division in the Labour Party, ruling out coalition. Has anybody listened to what I've actually said? At the end of the day, the man got 3,000 votes. Of course I was going to shake his hand. There has to be a respect for the people, for those 3,000 voters. People have good jobs, decent incomes, they're looking at the cranes in the sky. They cannot buy the apartments that are being built.
Just to kick it off, it's been an absolute wild 2 or 3 days for you. How have you found it? Has it been the most intense week of your life?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, to put it mildly, and I suppose, look, it's still all quite surreal because I suppose, being honest, you know, this campaign, we didn't just fight this campaign over the past 3 weeks. We've been fighting it over the past 4 years, working really hard on the ground, very determined that we're not just shouting from the sidelines, but going in, trying to get things done, and also setting out a vision for what we want to do, you know, in our city, within the communities across Dublin Central. And so a lot of the commentary over the past number of weeks about Dublin Central had been so much focused on what I might call the celebrity candidates, and didn't even give us a chance, which, you know, hurt, because, you know, you do all this work in the ground. So I suppose, to be honest, on Saturday morning there was just this huge sense of relief that that we had got a really good vote. And then, of course, I suppose this surprise that Gerry Hutch had got the vote that he got, and then that obviously set and trailed in you know, an incredible 48 hours.
And I suppose even just that, the intenseness, such on the intenseness of when he arrived into the town centre. Have you ever seen anything like that? And what did he say to you when within that massive media scrum?
Yeah, look, it was certainly a moment, and even at one stage it was kind of interesting because they had indicated to us that, you know, he wanted to shake my hand, and look, you know, at the end of the day, the man got 3,000 votes. Of course I was going to shake his hand. There has to be a respect for the people, for those 3,000 voters. But what was interesting was, you know, such was this kind of scrum that it actually kind of, it was like it overshot the runway. It actually moved past us, because such was the layer of security around him, and then the media scrum past him. So look, I think the thing is that the handshake was important. As I say, to my mind, you know, that there has to be respect for everybody who puts themselves forward, whatever their backgrounds, and ultimately he wished me well, talked about the people who he felt was voting for him, and I made very clear that I will be a TD for every single person in Dublin Central, and I'm also crystal clear that there's a huge depth of frustration in our communities in Dublin Central, about housing, families with children with additional needs, huge concerns that they feel haven't been addressed in many years.
Yeah, and would you invite Gerry Hutch to remain within the community and to try and help that area over the next coming years?
Well, I think that's up to himself now. Look, you know, I suppose we've always been focused on our candidacy. We're thrilled. I'm personally thrilled, but, like, you know, it's not just me, it's the people who've been working with me day in, day out, over a number of years now, when long before an election was ever called. I'm particularly thrilled for them, and we are absolutely determined now to make a real impact as a TD for Dublin Central, and you know, get to the heart of those issues that have been there for many, many years.
And I suppose even to go to if we rewind back to Saturday and your own election team and your strategist within the Labour Party, at what point did you think that you could claw it back in terms of transfers? When did that kind of moment come to you? Did you think you had a shot early on, or did it play out a little bit differently than you thought? Well,
I think, you know, anybody who's a student of Irish politics and democracy, you know, should certainly look at that count, because, you know, our sense on Saturday morning was, okay, we're 500 votes behind, what kind of transfers will he get? But the reality is he picked up transfers from right across the board, and some very interesting and unexpected areas. This is the beauty of democracy. But really, I suppose the game changer was Saturday night, when there was a 66% transfer rate between Ona Kenavon and Gary Gannon. And I think it was at that stage that we felt that we had a real shot of taking it. Now, saying that, Sunday morning the gap widened to 2,000 votes, and I certainly, you know, was like, well, look, people are coming up to congratulate me, and I was like, I'm not taking anything for granted until I see the final figures. And look, you know, we're just so delighted that it played out. Like, I think the reality is ultimately Nasa Horrigan's transfers and Mary Fitzpatrick's transfers played a huge part in ultimately seeing me elected, and it is a sad day that we do not have a Green Party TD in Dublin Central, and Nasa obviously was a very fine public representative, and indeed Mary Fitzpatrick has been working in the area for many, many years.
Super. And then I suppose if we go to the next kind of part, which is the road to government, and You were on RT last night. The media's reporting the Labour is a deeply divided party, with yourself speaking yesterday that with the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, some media have even gone to say that you've essentially ruled it out. Where would you kind of stand on that now in terms of what the comments made yesterday, that even on the way in here and on the radio they were saying Marie Sherlock rules out coalition?
Yeah, and you know, I must say I'm a bit bewildered, like as in division in the Labour Party, ruling out coalition. Has anybody listened to what I've actually said? Like throughout this campaign, we have made crystal clear that we will not be going in just to prop up Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. We will not be going in just to make up the numbers. We will, post-election, we always said we would talk to the other small parties of the centre-left and the Green Movement with whom we share values with, and if we can form a common platform, then there's a basis for negotiation. Look, I worked in the trade union movement for many years, right? There's strength in numbers. You know, the reality now is that there's 86 votes between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, 86 seats between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. There's 11 of us, right? You don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out what the outcome of that government is going to be, because ultimately coalition negotiations boil down to numbers. Now, if Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who've been courting us throughout this election, are truly serious about us wanting to be in government with them, well, let's hear from them. You know, what are they willing to offer us? But I think the critical thing here is that if we want to have a serious impact in government, if we want to be not reduced to a single issue, and certainly our party has never been about one specific, you know, we are about, you know, our health system, our education system, housing being the biggest workers' rights issue of our generation, then of course we need to make a real impact right across government. And at the moment we won't be able to do that going in on our own. We have to do it with other smaller parties. So look, those conversations are taking place this week. Nothing has been ruled in or out. We'll have to see where they go and then take it from there. But certainly at the moment, you know, from the government's perspective, they only need two additional votes to get them to that magic number of 88. And I suppose the question is, you know, for certainly for us, we will have those conversations ourselves. We're meeting as a PLP on Thursday, and we will talk to the other smaller parties, and then let's see where it goes from there. But there's no division, and it's, you know, people aren't listening if they see division.
But that leads us on then to, I suppose, what would you be the Lady parties and your kind of non-negotiables for if you were to go into government with the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael? What kind of topics really are your immovable objects in those negotiations?
Yeah, so look, like, you know, we look at housing. We have talked about a state construction company. I know my own constituency, there's people with good jobs, decent incomes. They're looking at the cranes in the sky. They cannot buy the apartments that are being built. And a number of years ago, there was a big kerfuffle about the bulk purchase of houses out in County Kildare. The government responded, had a higher stamp duty, planning restrictions. They've done none of that for apartments. So they're effectively condemning a whole generation of people now to exorbitant rents in insecure tenures within apartments. That has to change with regards to the bulk purchase of apartments. We need to do something much bigger and stronger with regards to the amount of long-term vacant properties and houses across the city. And again, the state, this government effectively sits in its hands and says it's okay if those buildings are empty for 10 or 20 years. That to me is not good enough. We need a much stronger set of compulsory purchase order laws and a much higher vacant homes tax. And you know, that's how, and of course we need to build on public land. We need the state directly to be building. That is absolutely critical to what we're saying, but not just us in the Labour Party, other parties as well. So housing, workers' rights, and we've seen the road back by Fine Gael in particular over the last 12 months in terms of any sort of progress in the workers' rights sphere. And at the end of the day, you know, these are simple asks in terms of making sure that anybody who's sick, and you know, again, it's not about somebody going off to paint their nails for the day, somebody who's sick, you know, that they're entitled to up to 10 days paid leave. This is a commitment by Fine Gael and government. They have backed away from that. Certainly, you know, the power to the right to be recognised for collective bargaining. So giving workers a right to go in and talk to their employer and be recognised by their employer, you know, together. We don't have that in Ireland. We have that in almost every other country across the European Union, but we don't have that in Ireland, and certainly the mood music from Fianna Gael has been really negative in that space over the last 12 months. So, workers' rights, housing, the children the families I meet with children with additional needs in my area, there's a waiting list of about 3 to 4 years just for an assessment of need alone before you even get to the therapies. We have to change all that, and that comes down to how we recruit and how we retain staff. So again, these are three of a whole raft of issues that are really important for us, and certainly going into government we would have to see radical change in order for us to be part of a government.
I suppose on that then, I'll use a buzzword that you've probably heard about 100 times in the last 2 days, but what do you are you worried about this so-called mudguard effect of going into government? Obviously Labour have been burned in the past in that regard, and obviously the Green Party more recently. What are your worries around that and kind of safeguards to the mudguard?
Well, I don't have any worries about the mudguard, because ultimately we've set out that vision that ultimately to have an impact we need to ensure that we have strength in numbers, and we are thrilled that we have 11 TDs now, and hopefully we'll have 3 to 4 senators as well. But ultimately, when you look at the 11 versus the 86, the numbers are clear there, that you need to have bigger numbers to be able to go in and have a real impact in government. So, look, I think the ball is in the court now of the two biggest parties, and ultimately what kind of government they want. But it galls me that we're going to have that it looks like we're going to have business as usual over the next 5 years. And I think while many people voted for that, and that is their absolute right to do that, I think there's a whole group of other people who will feel very angry now over the coming days when, I think when we all realise that this is more of the same and not the change that people are telling me that they so desperately want in their communities.
And for yourself, you're coming off the back of being a senator. What do you now predict the biggest changes in your life from as a role and kind of a lifestyle in terms of coming from a senator now to come back to being a TD? What would you?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose I have worked extraordinarily hard over the last number of years on the ground as a senator, previously a councillor, and look, I have 3 small kids at home and a husband who's a busy job as well, so there's an awful lot of juggling, but I think it's probably having a better system in place now, and making sure that we can have a real impact for our communities, and then I suppose being able to make sure that I get that balance right as well. During the campaign we had 2 bereavements in our family. I buried an aunt and then buried a friend last Saturday, and these are the things that you're a campaign doesn't allow you to necessarily even think or grasp these because you're so busy. And I suppose it's trying to kind of put in place a system now that we can be really effective for the people across Dublin Central, because ultimately politics is, I suppose, the practice of politics in Ireland, as we all know, it's about individual representations, people coming to us with individual queries. But I'm not just about that. I'm also about affecting, change, system change, whether it's in, disabilities, whether it's in housing, whether it's in workers' rights, setting up that vision. So as to be able to get that balance right now for me, for our operation, for our constituency, and provide real leadership that I think people are crying out for. Because again, there's parts, particularly the inner city, we have sports grounds, in an area that needs sports grounds that have been closed for a number of years, like multi-use games areas that, like I said, that there's weeds growing on, and you're like, how can this be happening in this day and age? So it's things like that in the inner city that we have to get right, but that means being able to give the time and dedication to that. So I suppose the big change now is making sure that I have a system in place that we don't burn ourselves out, that we're actually sustainable over the next number of years.
If you look at the Labour manifesto going into the government, proactively recruit Irish people from home and abroad to bring back new skills and experience, it's kind of reminiscent of the Sinn Féin policy. What is Labour's plans for mass repatriation from these countries for young Irish people?
Well, look, firstly, can I just say, like, we have a serious issue with regards to apprenticeships, right? Okay, ensuring that we have that steady pipeline of skills into the construction sector. And like, I produced legislation requiring that the minimum wage be paid to all apprentices, because, you know, there's a whole series of issues now about people becoming an apprentice and then not being able to sustain it, you know, that we need to keep people through those 4 to 5 years. So look, for us, it is about ensuring that we have that steady pipeline here in Ireland, but we know that there's a whole raft of skills that have gone abroad. And so, you know, there's an issue there with the recognition of prior learning, a recognition of the skills that people have acquired abroad. Sometimes there might necessarily not be a clear match up between the skills or the certifications abroad and what they are here. So we need to get that right, but ultimately, you know, we need to make sure that it's attractive for workers to come back. And I suppose, again, my experience in the trade union movement, we know that the construction sector in particular is made up of a very large number of very small companies, right? And there's all these you know, I suppose gaps between, you know, projects and contracts. And so that's why we believe the state construction company is really important, because we can then provide a steady income, steady employment to a whole group of construction workers, design teams, and everybody who's involved in the construction process, and actually streamline that process to make sure that we'll be much more efficient and productive in actually building houses in this country. Because again, when you look at how housing schemes are built, I think there's efficiencies there that we can really get to, and while also ensuring that people, you know, earn a good living and that there is that steady pipeline of skills into the sector.
Super. And then lastly, I suppose from us, as Joe is a youth publisher with a massive reach for younger people in Ireland, what would be your message to the young people of Ireland? I suppose especially around those topics that most affect them that came up during the election.
Yeah, so look, I think there's 3 probably big things for me, right? Number one, in terms of housing, is the single biggest issue, and obviously the amount of people in their 20s or their mammies that I have met during this campaign, where people are telling me all they're doing is going away parties. And that is heartbreaking, right? And we're not offering hope. We're not offering a future to people. And Dublin has become a city of luck now. When you were born, you know, when you were able to buy a house, and if you're a younger generation, like that hope is not there. We need to change that, and that's why I feel so passionate that, you know, again, there's a sense maybe that the housing problem has got too big. Yes, it is enormous, but if there's a number of key changes made with regards to the bulk purchase of apartments, with regards to renters' rights in terms of the eviction ban, and with regards to transparent rent increases, with regards to the building on the 33 acres across Dublin Central in my own constituency that the Land Development Agency has identified, and of course the vacant homes, then we can begin to turn things around. So, you know, change is possible in housing, but there needs to be very clear decisions, and my big fear now is this, you know, unfortunately I think an older generation have voted for, you know, the devil they know rather than the devil they don't, and we're not going to see those changes in this upcoming government, but we will fight day and night to try to pressurise the government into that. I think the second key thing is that we have a cost of living crisis in this country, but there's been a failure to join the dots with the climate crisis. So the country's awash with money, and yet we almost don't know how to spend it in terms of our public finances. But we look at our climate crisis, and, you know, there's huge concern now that we need to actually take real action. And we see how, you know, in my own constituency in Dublin 7, 1/4, about 24% of all houses are BERE F-G rated. So if you're a renter, you can't do anything about your enormous heating bills. If you're low income and owning your house, you know, it's almost impossible to retrofit. We need to change all that. We need street by street retrofitting so that we're cutting bills, blind to whether you're a renter, low income or high income, and then ultimately reducing emissions as well, which is ultimately where we need to go to. And I suppose the third big thing for me is in terms of workers' rights, because at the moment, you know, it's great to, again, you know, meet so many people who tell me they're in good jobs, decent incomes, and then that can change overnight if there is a downturn or people are let go. And we have to give workers more rights in the workforce. In particular, we have an insane situation at the moment where our minimum wage legislation effectively treats legal adults as children for those who are aged 18 and 19. Now that is absolutely wrong, and that needs to be changed. And again, like, we've had foot dragging by this government for no reason. So we need to that, so that's for very young workers in terms of age 18, 19, but even those in their 20s, we need to be able to afford them an opportunity now, because I've people in their 20s work with me, and there's like they're not shy about saying what they want, but then when you look at what their rights are in the workplace in terms of being able to come together and be able to say to their employer, we want to be treated with dignity and respect here. We want to be paid a fair wage. They don't have those rights in this country compared with other countries. We need to change that.
Super. And very, very finally, there was a lot of interesting headlines that you were adorned across the papers over the last 2 days. Was there any particular headlines in terms of the second name that you
I know. Well, we've had great fun. In fairness, I have a 24-year-old Luca who's the brains behind the operation in terms of put Sherlock on the case and the play on Sherlock Holmes. So certainly, I think the tabloids had a field day in terms of foiling the monk and all the various things. But look, we don't want to get into
the criminal.
That's it, exactly. Well, look, did more in a weekend than what was done in a decade, and all of that. But look, I think the thing is ultimately, it was a bit of fun, and I think this is the thing about politics as well. While I take my politics very seriously, I've learned a long time ago that you have to have a bit of fun. You have to be able to catch people's attention as well, and people want to know that there's a bit of personality and something a little bit different behind those who are representing our communities.